Welcome back, everybody. I'm back with another review here. This time, it's not from Shudder, it's not even horror, and it's also not one of my 80s retro reviews. This is for a newer film called Val. This one hit my radar pretty quickly after the first trailer had released. I kind of grew up seeing a lot of films with Val Kilmer, which is who this is about. I'd seen Top Secret, Real Genius, Top Gun, Willow, The Doors, Tombstone, Batman Forever, Heat, Island of Dr. Moreau, Ghost in the Darkness, The Saint, Red Planet, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and then that was about it. I kind of fell out of really following his work somewhere along the way. Even Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, I didn't actually see until years after it came out. So I kind of kept up with him, over the years on social media. Saw some posts about all this Mark Twain stuff he was working on, this other project he'd been putting together and performing live, which I'd always wanted the opportunity to see, but it never came my way. And now I think I've lost that opportunity forever because, as some of you may know, he had a pretty serious bout with throat cancer and has lost the ability to speak clearly. So anyways, Val. Not the man, but the movie. It's a documentary centering around Val Kilmer's life, using footage he captured over 40, almost 50 years. From home movies when he was little all the way up to more current, interviews and everything. And while it may seem a little bit strange to have a documentary created for someone who is still very much alive and well now that he's cancer-free, it is still an interesting one to check out. These flashbacks of sorts that we get through the footage that he captured, from the 80s particularly, but also from some of the things that he worked on in the 90s is interesting because it gives one a glimpse into what happens behind the scenes, both in the films he was involved in, as well as a peek into his life that we never really had before. We got some general fun behind the scenes stuff from Top Gun was kind of interesting, as well as some plays that he got to work on throughout high school and when he was in Juilliard. And we also get some interesting footage, some kind of confirmations about some of the problems happening with the island of Dr. Moreau. From what I understand, that entire shoot was completely screwed up. There's even a documentary about how much it fell apart and why and what they did to try to salvage it. And, so we get to see him butting heads with the director. And it's a very interesting way of looking at those, looking at people who make films as actual people who may have fights here and there and or some stress trying to get a project completed. This film also doesn't really hold back on past criticisms of Val Kilmer as far as the way that he is on set. There were reports throughout the later half of the 90s of him being very difficult to work with. In many cases, details would come out a year or two later that kind of smooth things over a bit. But once those stories come out, it kind of, sets him to have a reputation, such as I remember hearing a story about when he was working on The Saint, he was supposedly yelling at the extras, telling them not to look at him. And they were all telling, do not look at Val while we are filming. And this came across like he's kind of stuck up. He doesn't want anybody's eyes on him, like it's going to mess up his artistry. He's too important for that. When really what came out later was that a lot of these extras had never worked as an extra before. So they were all staring at him or staring at the camera, and they were ruining every take. And that's where this outburst of do not look at Val had actually come from. But by then that reputation was already set and it was very difficult to kick. And while it seems, this documentary kind of confirms that he is very passionate and he might get out of hand every now and then, it's all for the sake of how he works as an artist. Anyways, there's also a lot of touching moments in this with his family history, and especially seeing footage of a convention he was at where so many people were still asking for his signature with a quote from a 35-year-old movie. Everybody's hitting him up about Top Gun. Now, on one hand, I would imagine that it could be kind of comforting to know that a film that you did 35 years ago had affected so many people in such a positive way that now that they have a chance for an autograph decades later, they're still going to ask for a quote from that movie and might not really have followed as much of your newer stuff. But at the same time, I think it's kind of sad that there's so much later work, work where he pushed himself outside of his comfort zone to try to grow as an artist and have people just not care as much about that work. I mean, like I said about myself, I haven't seen anything of his past Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. So, before this documentary, I would have also been in that camp of asking for an autograph for a film from the 80s. For me, it probably would have been Real Genius. That's kind of one of those ones that I grew up with. But so anyways, what I really love about this documentary in particular is that it's very well balanced. It moves along his life at an excellent pace and doesn't seem to spend too much time in one time frame or about one aspect of his life. You're getting, you aren't going to get 5 minutes of the 80s and an hour of Mark Twain. Also, despite the loss of his voice due to cancer, it has this feeling of being a lot more upbeat than I was really prepared for, a lot more hopeful rather than some sad story about him. Not only that, but having his son Jack narrate the film was an excellent choice because Jack sounds a lot like him. So you really get the sense more like it's Val speaking these words rather than his son narrating. But anyways, to give an indication of why I will give this film the rating that I have, is that finishing this film made me want to do a few things. One thing was I wanted to revisit a few of his older films, films I hadn't seen in years, not just from the 80s, but some from the 90s as well. Even ones that didn't go over that well, like Island of Dr. Moreau. I barely remember it. I just remember not liking it, but it might be interesting to revisit one of those. One's like Real Genius, of course, just stuck in my brain forever. Same thing with Top Secret, so I can skip a rewatch on those. Another thing is to check out his post 2000, post Kiss Kiss Bang Bang work because there's so much there that I haven't seen. I'd probably stick more to things that he was kind of the star of or a major player in rather than any bit roles. But for one reason or another, I just never got around to them, and now I really want to. Um, one more item is that I want to keep up with him still on social media. It's always interesting to see what projects he has coming on, and finally, maybe I'll check out the book that he recently published. I believe it was last April, called "I'm Your Huckleberry." Even though I'm sure a lot of what's in it was covered in this documentary, it might be an interesting read. I'm actually reading Brat by Andrew McCarthy right now, and it's having the similar effect as a Val documentary film did in that it makes me want to revisit what I was familiar with. So far I've only really revisited Mannequin, which I'll put a link to my review here, as well as St. Elmo's Fire, which turns out is not about Sesame Street. But anyways, back to Val. I rate this one as an A, just solid A right there. It's definitely worth checking out. It's very interesting, even if you weren't the biggest Val Kilmer fan. Even if you only know a couple of really popular films, it's a very interesting film. It's really done well, and it's definitely worth your time. So Val, give it an A. It's on Amazon Prime right now as far as when I'm publishing this, and I strongly recommend it. So anyways, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next one.